right, so let's get going. So we're in chapter 10, and I'm hoping that you guys are enjoying this journey of kind of getting into the public speaking. Eventually you'll be doing a little bit more speaking. This chapter is on delivering your speech. So we've been talking a lot about how to structure your speech, how to word your speech, and so we're kind of getting to this moment of delivering your speech, okay? So we'll be doing some delivery. I've been pushing it back just a little bit for you guys, but eventually you will be getting up and giving me your speeches. So please look at the syllabus, you know, those assignments are coming up. So delivering your speech is going to cover a number of different aspects, okay? If you want to track with me, I'm on page 156 and 157. And the authors open the chapter, we're talking about delivery method, selecting a delivery method. Now, you've already been introduced a little bit to an impromptu speech where I actually made you get up and speak, right? That is one delivery method where you're just like, okay, your turn, go. But, you know, it's a little bit more complicated. So there's extemporaneous speeches, which is what I'm actually asking you to prepare for right now. I want you to be ready for extemporaneous speaking. I want you to think about what you're going to say and plan it out and do some research. You have these opportunities way ahead of time. So most speeches that you will be delivering, they will be extemporaneous speeches. What is an extemporaneous speech? How would you explain the word extemporaneous? And I'm asking that question because it's important. Because if you don't know the difference, or you can't explain to me what extemporaneous is when you see that word in a quiz, you're really not going to know how to answer a question. Because you have no idea what it means. So can somebody explain to me what extemporaneous means? In your own words. What do you think it means? I know it's a long English word, but what does it mean? Yeah, you can Google it too. That's okay.
Is it similar to impromptu?
Nope. Actually, the opposite. All right, let me make it simple. An impromptu is unplanned, right? Extemporaneous is the opposite.
Planning about it.
It's planned. It means you worked on it. It means you prepared for it. It's something that you developed, okay? And this is what I mean, you know, that a lot of the speeches you're gonna be giving are extemporaneous, where somebody says, okay, this is what you have to do, and it's gonna happen next week, and this is the time that you have between now and next week to plan it out, okay? So that's what I mean. So, the whole book, you know, that we're studying is really teaching you how to do mostly extemporaneous speeches, okay? Speeches where you essentially have to work out all the details ahead of time versus just, you know, getting up and speaking on the spur of the moment. So the whole book is, you know, is about extemporaneous speeches because that's most of the time that's what you're gonna be doing. But very rarely you'll have an opportunity where you just kind of have to jump up and do a speech without being prepared. Okay, so some of the skills that we're developing in this class, for example, writing an outline for a speech. Remember, building that introduction, body, conclusion, that idea. You don't get to do that in impromptu speech because it's like that. It's supposed to be in your head already. You make it up as you go along. But in extemporaneous speech you do, and this is what we're working on this whole semester, these types of speeches. So, you obviously have a choice if you're going to be making a speech. Are you making a speech that's prepared or not prepared? Well, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but these are different modes of delivery. So if extemporaneous is planned, the impromptu is unplanned. It's something that just happens. You may have just a few minutes to prepare. I mean, imagine you're in a meeting, okay? Here you are sitting in a meeting, and your boss looks at you and says, oh, I'm gonna finish my report, and after me, so-and-so is gonna do their report. And you're like, wait a minute, I didn't know that was coming. I'm not prepared. So now you have like 10 or 15 minutes before the boss finishes to prepare your speech, because he already promised that you're going to. So you're sitting over there working on your notes. These things happen sometimes. Sometimes they're your fault, sometimes they're not your fault. But that's why it is a type of a technique that I want you to learn and know how to do it. Okay? But most of the time it will be extemporaneous speech. Now there's another form of speech, and that's the third variety is called manuscript speech. Manuscript speech, what does that mean? You guys read this textbook, so tell me what manuscript speech is like. What are we talking about?
The script should be written beforehand.
Right. Now, are you ever supposed to read your speech?
Sometimes.
This would be the only time.
Oh, okay.
This would be the only time. Manuscript speech, you read.
Okay.
All the other speeches, you don't. Okay, when you get up over here and you speak in front of me, if you read, I'm going to take points off. You're not supposed to read. You're supposed to look your audience in the eyes and speak. Okay? But a manuscript speech is a speech where what you're saying is very, very important, and the wording is very important, and you can't really alternate, you can't really change, you can't really say it in a different way. See, the reason why is in most speeches, you're allowed to say things the way you want to say, okay? But in a manuscript speech, what's in the content of the speech is so important that you cannot alter it, because it could be a legal thing, like you're reciting somebody's rights or something like that. You can't just make it up as you go along and say, oh, well, you know what I mean, I meant to say that, but I said that. Well, that's kind of the same thing. Well, no, it's not. So there are certain situations where a manuscript speech is important. Let's say, for example, a head of state is speaking to another head of state, and they're making a statement on behalf of the whole country. Well, they better get it right. And that's why sometimes manuscript speech will be used. So that is one time when it is absolutely appropriate to read your speech. But all the other times, no. Because then it's not really your speech. You're reading your manuscript, that's it. But at other times, you're speaking the way you feel, because you're trying to connect to the audience. You're trying to be in the moment, in that room. And everything in that room might change. And you have to be able to change with it. Well, you can't do that with a manuscript speech, because it's pre-written and you're just supposed to read it what it is, and that's it. It's a statement, essentially, that you're reading. Most of us are never going to have to do that. It is a variety of speech, but most of us are never going to be in a position to do these types of things. So it's a very narrow window where these types of speeches are used. Memorized speech is another variety. Now, you understand what a memorized speech is. It's a speech that you simply have committed to memory. Now, do I ever want you to memorize a speech? No, because the moment you memorized it, it no longer is flexible. You just stand over there and say everything the way you planned to say it. But what if something in the room changes? Well, you didn't plan for that. So you're just going to do what you planned. Is there a time for memorized speeches? Yes. There are probably occasions that are appropriate for a memorized speech. Occasions where you're going to be extremely nervous, where you're going to be on a camera or something like that, you might want to memorize a speech. That's okay. But most of the time, again, not the best thing. Why? Because it changes your relationship with your audience. We're talking about oral communication. We're talking about communication just people to people, right? So you're standing over there, and if you don't have a relationship with your audience, then it comes out stale. Then it might as well be watching a video, right? because it's not really you with them, it's just you, and they are not involved. So it loses that power of orality that we talked about in the first chapter and second chapter. It loses that power, okay? So those are your varieties of speech. So remember now, we have extemporaneous speech, impromptu speech, script, and memorized. So those are your choices, really pretty much it. As I said, in this class, we're focusing on extemporaneous, meaning you will be free to plan and free to ad-lib and free to change as you go with it. I'm not asking you to memorize it, but I am asking you to prepare. I don't want you to get up and give me an impromptu speech next time you're supposed to get up and give me a speech. I want you to prepare, okay? But I also don't want you to read. Because if you read, then you're not really paying attention to anybody else. You're just paying attention to yourself. And that means you might have to practice, okay? Which is okay. Now, any questions on those varieties of speech? Is it clear? Good? Okay. When you speak, as a speaker, you have a power. And your power is to connect with your audience and then to keep that connection going. Now, occasionally some of you guys might be tired, might be sleepy. It's, second part of the day and you've worked all day and you've been up early in the morning. And I would have tired students. I'm used to having tired students in class. It's not a problem. It's just reality. And people would start falling asleep or something like that, not because I'm boring, but because they're tired. Like when I was an inexperienced speaker for a long time, I thought that it was me. I thought that I'm a terrible speaker and everybody's falling asleep just because I'm boring. Until after a while I realized it actually doesn't have anything to do with me. They'd be falling asleep if anybody was speaking in a room. Doesn't matter at all. They're just simply tired. So as a speaker, you have a power. And one of the powers, sort of say, that you have is your speaking voice. Your speaking voice can alternate and change. You can use your voice to communicate in a variety of different ways. And you can utilize that power. We've talked about how when you write a speech, the way we write is not the way we speak, right? So if you write out your speech and then simply read it, it sounds like a letter from somebody else, or like you're reading a book. And it's not a real conversation. Because remember I told you that in a real conversation with a person, we use very basic vocabulary. We use very simple words. We use shorter sentences. In writing, we tend to use longer sentences, more complicated words. We're more formal in our writing, okay? So when you get up to speak in front of people, one of the powers of your voice you have is to have that conversational tone where people want to listen to you, because essentially you're having a dialogue with them. You're having a conversation. They may not be talking back, but you are actually having a conversation with them, okay? And that's powerful. If you want to ever, see how you do, record yourself. Do the same thing what I'm doing right now in class. I'm recording myself. I don't mind seeing all my things, but you'll be surprised sometimes. If you want to practice your speech at home, put up your cell phone, push record, and record yourself doing a speech. And then watch it as if you were the audience and see what you're doing and see what it is that you're doing wrong. Because you might be fidgeting too much or walking too much or shaking your head a certain way or scratching your head or adjusting your glasses, whatever that might be. There may be things that you're doing, you don't realize it. I have certain things, like I will play with my buttons, I'll twist my ring. That's my thing. That's what I do. And these are just habits. These are maybe bad habits, I don't know. But everyone has those. Some are more distracting than others, at least to your listeners, okay? So recording yourself and watching yourself is very, very good practice. So I definitely recommend that. Because then you'll see how you're using your voice. Are you loud enough? Do you project? Do you articulate? Do you mumble? Is that a question? It's like, do you mumble? Some people get up and they mumble. I can't hear what they're saying. Why? Because they're not saying it loud enough. or they're not saying it clear enough. A power of articulation. If we're getting up in front of people and speaking, we're not just speaking so we could say, okay, I spoke. We're speaking because we want to be effective. And if we're not articulating, that people are not understanding us, and therefore we're not effective because we're not getting through to them. Okay? So, one aspect that the authors highlight in this textbook on using your voice and using your presence as you are actually delivering the speech is they call it intelligibility. Intelligibility. Now, intelligibility means people understand you. You are intelligible, meaning they get it. It's really that simple. Have you ever heard somebody speak and say to yourself, I have no idea what they're saying, even though they have been speaking for like 2 minutes? For 2 minutes, they're talking, and you're saying to yourself, I have no idea what they're saying. I understand every word, but I don't understand what they're trying to say by the collection of words they're using. What is their point? Where are they going with all that? And I've been in rooms like that where I'm hearing a person speak and I'm like, I have no idea what this is about. It's like a person just switches topics and rambles on, and what is their topic? I don't know. I'm lost. So you don't want to be that person. You don't want to be a person who simply is not understood. So sometimes your intelligibility depends on certain skills that you use as you speak. Okay? For example, how well you pronounce things or how badly you pronounce things. Sometimes you may have good things to say, but you can't pronounce the words right. Have you ever heard somebody speaking with a very thick accent? In a language that you don't know, you're not familiar with that accent? Maybe you have some classes right now with some teachers who have accents that you're not used to. And you struggle. You're not fully getting it. So it could be that the person is speaking too fast, or a person is speaking too slow. Any one of those aspects can affect whether you understand a speech or not. Okay? So another facet of being understood and being heard and being effective is adjusting your volume. I told you, from time to time I have students in class who are simply tired and I want to fall asleep. So occasionally I would raise my volume. That's all I'm doing. Now, normally I tend to project, even in a small classroom and things like that. But if I'm speaking in a larger auditorium, I'm using a microphone. But even if I'm using a microphone, I would raise my volume. Why? Because I want to wake people up, right? All of a sudden they're drifting off and they're like, oh, he's talking, Because you can't get monotonous. You can get to like, if you're speaking with the same very measured tone, people will start to tune you out very easily. But if your tone changes all the time, if you go up and down, volume-wise, or even the tonality of your voice, like, high pitch, low pitch, you can use that too. People will tune you out, but it's hard to tune you out if you vary your volume and your tone. So these are one of the techniques that you can use. So there is sometimes background noise that bothers me. There'd be students outside the door talking, right? We're ending a class and our next class is gathering and they start chatting and they're loud and I'm trying to give you your assignments for the next week and you're having a hard time paying attention because they're chatting outside the door. So what do? I raise my volume. I simply speak louder. And all of a sudden, I'm heard. That is a technique. If you don't use that technique when it needs to be used, then you're not going to be effective because you're not going to get it done. That's what's necessary. You have to be prepared for distractions. You have to be prepared for a noise. You have to be prepared for somebody mowing the lawn outside while you're speaking. I remember this one time I was teaching a class and these guys were mowing the lawn right in front of one of the windows and it annoyed me like crazy. I actually, took a break and went out and asked them to not mow right now while the classes are in session. I said, when we go on a lunch break, come mow this area, but don't do this right now because my students can't concentrate, I can't concentrate. All we hear is a lawnmower going by outside the windows, and it's like, the windows are not that thick. So sometimes, it's difficult to do these things, and you have to stop. But a lot of times you can work through it if it's manageable, by simply raising your volume, okay? Controlling your rate is another aspect. By rate of speech, what do I mean? When I say rate of speech, come on, ladies and gentlemen, rate. What does that mean?
Number of words.
Number of words, that's right. So let me ask you a question. Do you think I speak fast or do you think I speak slow? Just your personal opinion. I'm not going to get offended, don't worry. I'm fairly confident in myself, so you're not going to offend me, don't worry. Do you think I speak fast or slow? Your personal opinion. Personal opinion is going to be different. And I realize I'm asking you, it's like saying, do you like chocolate or do you like, vanilla? It's a personal opinion. Just, what do you think? Fast or slow? Fast. You think it's fast?
Still intelligible.
Well, there's a balance there. It could be fast and unintelligible, or we could be slow. So you think fast. Anybody else thinks I'm fast? I tend to think I'm on the fast side, personally. I think I'm a little bit faster than an average person. It has to do with my culture. It has to do where I come from and how I was raised and how people around me speak. So if I'm surrounded by people who tend to be fast talkers, I'm also a fast talker and I speak like this all the time and never ever stop. See, no breath. Other people are slow talkers. To me, that's not any better than a fast talker, honestly. I prefer fast talk, but that's me, because I'm used to fast talk. And somebody who's not, they're having a hard time. So I have a coworker who speaks very fast, very slow actually. He takes pauses between his conjunctions. He will say something like, let's see, he'll say something like this: rate is the number of words spoken per minute. See, I would never say per, then pause, and then say minute. I'd say per minute. I'll actually slap them together. Why? Because that's how I speak. But he will do that. He will pause and wait for a whole 2 seconds sometimes between a conjunction and another word, or a preposition and another word. Drives me crazy. Drives me absolutely nuts. But that's the way he is. So I have a hard time, listening to him, because I want to say, hurry up, get it out. What it is that you're trying to say? And so, I can do that with my coworkers. I don't usually do that with my students, but coworkers are different, so I can be tougher on them. That's the idea. But so rate is the number of words you get out, and everyone's going to be different. But you also have to think about your audience. Your audience may be used to a particular rate. And I will tell you honestly, I don't know how it is where you're from, but in America, people in the north tend to speak fast. People in the south tend to speak slow. And that is a general rule of thumb. It doesn't say anything about them as a people. It's just they're different. These are regional tendencies. I don't know why people in the south tend to speak slower, but people in the north tend to speak faster. Maybe because they're cold all the time and they got to talk like this all the time because they're freezing. I don't know. But that's just a fact. You meet people who are born and raised in the north of the United States and they tend to speak faster. People raised south stretch their sentences. But that's not always true, because you'll always find exceptions. People who don't follow the rules. But anyway, what if you had the ability to control your rate? Where you knew that you were a fast speaker, but you slowed down on purpose. Or you knew that you were a slow speaker and you sped up on purpose. See, that would be called skill. That would be called mastery. Because you are in control, not some other circumstance. Okay. Enunciation. What is enunciation? What does it mean to enunciate? Very good. Articulating each syllables. Yeah, so there's some syllables we swallow, right? Now, if English is not your native language, people who do not enunciate, they're terrible to listen. because they swallow half of a word, right? And you can't figure out what it is that they're saying because that's not your native language. You need that rest of that word. You can't have that swallow. You know, other person who intuitively knows what that person is going to say next, they can handle it, but you can't because you're still new to the language and you need that. So enunciation, you know, some people become unintelligible because they don't enunciate, because they don't pronounce all the syllables, they swallow them. Colloquial speech, slang, that's what happens. People swallow entire half of a word or something like that. Or they twist the word and say it in such a way that nobody outside of their social group even knows what they're saying. And come on, that's not an American thing, by the way. Every culture does it. Every language group, every culture does it. They all do this. You know, Spanish speakers do this, Korean speakers do that, same thing. Swallow whole entire pieces of words and just get them out, and that's good enough. And you're supposed to figure out the rest. So that happens. Let's see, pronunciation. So we're talking about enunciation and pronunciation. Pronouncing is basically using, enunciation is, let's see if we can articulate the difference between enunciating and pronouncing. Pronouncing is when you simply try to hit the right sound in the right way. And enunciating it is by deliberately keeping track that you are hitting every syllable. Let's put it that way. Some people do not pronounce certain sounds well, okay? Do you know of anybody who can't pronounce certain sounds? Maybe you struggle with a sound. Any sounds you ever struggle with in English or anything like that? So like I know, you know, a number of my friends have struggled with the sound TH in English. The. Had a hard time doing it. Just not part of their tongue doesn't want to go that way. They just want to say thank you. They don't want to do that. They say thank you. They use a T instead of a th. That's trouble pronouncing, not enunciating, because they're still heard. They still stress it the same way. They still have they put the emphasis on the thank you the same way as you do on the thank you. Exactly right, except they mispronounce one sound. One. For some people it's the R's or the L's. So there's a lot of sounds out there that people struggle with, and certain language groups are more prone to struggle with various sounds because their languages might not even have that sound or close to that or something like that. So everyone's going to do that. So this is the difference between pronunciation and enunciation. Are you guys clear? Are you tracking with me? Pronouncing has to do with actual letters that you make the right sound. If it's a T, it's supposed to sound like a T, not like a TH. If it's a D, it's supposed to sound like a D, not like a T. Because if all your Ds sounds like Ts, we're in trouble. Because you're having trouble pronouncing, not enunciating. Enunciation is a whole different aspect of your speech. So if I ask you a question on the difference between enunciating and pronouncing, are you guys going to get it? Okay, good. Hopefully. Okay. Dialects. The author mentions dialects. As I mentioned already, dialects are a problem. You can struggle to understand certain dialects. When I first moved to this area, I had a hard time understanding Southern dialect, and specifically African Americans. I had a hard time. It took me a long time to learn to understand people because I simply could not follow. Like being around people for a long time, I've learned the patterns of speech, and now I can feel very confident in what people are saying most of the time. But when I first moved to this area, I really struggled. I had a hard time. I was embarrassing because a lot of times people would speak to me and they say something, and I would say, "Excuse me, pardon me, can you say that again? I didn't understand you." And they'll say the same exact thing. See, when somebody asks you to repeat something, if they say, "Excuse me" or "Pardon me," the cue is to not say it the same exact way you said it before. Okay? That means you're not pronouncing something right, or maybe not your enunciation is wrong, or it could be that you're using a word I don't know. So when somebody says, "Excuse me," or "What was that again?" or something, if they interrupt you and they say that somehow they're not understanding it, you're supposed to say it differently, not exactly the same way. So it doesn't help if I don't get you the first time, then I probably will not understand you the second time around. But people do that. So dialects can be a problem. I've struggled with dialects. I know that you guys probably struggle with dialects, and you understand that some dialects are harder to understand. So it has to do with your culture. It has to do with being receptive to that particular vocal presentation. So some people just need to grow on you. Let's put it that way. You need to get used to the way they're talking. Okay. There could be issues with grammar. There could be issues with syntax. Well, it's not a secret for you guys that a lot of people for whom English is not the first language tend to use incorrect grammar whenever they speak all the time. Well, guess what? It drives people crazy because they don't understand what the person says simply because the person cannot frame the sentence correctly. So I understood every single word that you said, but I don't understand what you said by those words. And the reason why I don't understand what you said by those words is because you didn't put them in the right order. It's that simple. So there's a disconnect because there's a lack of skill. So that's not a dialect per se, but it's an issue of somebody who is not a native speaker. And that becomes an obstacle in understanding a speech or delivering a speech as well, because you have a hard time getting it out correctly because you're still struggling yourself with the right grammar. So that's an issue. All right. As far as the oratory skill goes, creating a certain variety in your speech is very important. Maybe when you're a beginner, that's not a big deal because all you worry about is just getting up and getting it out. But when you become a talented speaker, when you become a person who is very comfortable doing it, creating variety in your speech is important. Now you may notice that sometimes I pause and other times I race. I will pause at certain places, not because I'm thinking, I already know what I'm going to say. I already know I'm going to say 5 sentences from now. I pause because I want to give you time to sink in. Or I want to emphasize a certain idea. So like right now, I just said emphasize. And what did I do? I raised my voice and I went down. I stressed that word in a very emphatic way because I wanted to emphasize. Because I wanted you to hear that word. Because I wanted to stress it. Because that word is the most important in my sentence. So varying your rate, varying your pitch of your voice, going up and down, speaking slowly then fast and slowly again, that's all part of the art of speech. Stressing certain words and not stressing others lets your listeners understand what are the key words in your sentence. If you're using a term, you might want to stress that term. Why? Because that term is important to what you're saying. So therefore, you want everyone to hear it right, get it in. And by stressing it, you're drawing attention. It's like drawing arrows on a particular word. Like imagine if you were reading a sentence. Sometimes you don't know what the author would have stressed in that sentence. Let's say it's a long sentence, and you're reading it, and you're like, not sure what the point is here. But if you heard the author speak, I'm sure you would hear what the point is because the author would stress that word with greater power, with a greater emphasis. And so that's what a good speaker would do. And in that sense, speaking like this and just standing and saying everything in the same exact rate of voice, because all the words mean the same thing and there's no difference between them whatsoever. You have no idea what I'm saying because you don't know what words are important, which ones are not. You see, that's going to sleep speech. That doesn't work. I have to emphasize certain words and I have to de-emphasize other words because that will help you comprehend. So again, you're always speaking, thinking about your audience, and a variety in your speech, variety of rate, variety of pitch or stress, creates certain melodic feature to your speech that essentially allows people to comprehend better, remember actually what you said, and connect to it. Which again goes back to the idea of being effective. We don't speak just to speak, we speak to be effective. All right, let's see. Let's talk about stress patterns a little bit. I did talk a little bit about emphasis right now, but you can learn how to emphasize words. There's a beautiful example over here. If you look with me on page 161, under the stress patterns heading, look at this sentence. This is how emphasis changes the meaning of what is being said. It doesn't change the words at all, but the meaning, what is being communicated, changes it. So look at the first sentence. It's talking about Jane here, okay? And notice the word that is italicized. The word that is italicized is the word being stressed. So the sentence says, Jane's taking Tom out for pizza tonight. So what is the author trying to express here? Who? It's Jane. It's not Kelly or Tanya or Jack. She is doing it. So she is the most important part of that sentence. And therefore, her name is stressed. Okay? So look at the second sentence. Jane's taking out Tom for pizza tonight. Well, what's important in that sentence? Well, it's the fact that she's taking out Tom and not Jack or Katie. Now, it's the other person that's important in the sentence. And Jane, she's not. She's not the focus. All right? Look at the third one. Jane's taking Tom out for pizza tonight. What are they talking about? By stressing the word out, I'm saying they're going to go eat somewhere else. They're not going to stay at home. They're really going to go way out there somewhere. So the idea that they're changing their pattern. So, okay, so that's the idea. Look at the next one. Jane's taking Tom out for pizza tonight. Not pasta, okay? Not salad, not wings. It's pizza. So when I stress the word pizza, I'm emphasizing what they're going to be eating. Who is taking out who is no longer important. It's what they're going to eat that's important in that sentence. So you see, all we're doing is stressing a different word. Jane's taking Tom out for pizza tonight. Why is that important tonight? Well, tonight is the night. So it's like all of a sudden it's important that this is tonight and not tomorrow and not yesterday, that tonight is the big deal to the author. So you can see how you can actually read a sentence. When you read a book, you don't see this. When you read a book, you have no idea which words are being stressed. But when you hear speech, you do. And this is one of the examples of orality. As I said, there is a beauty in an oral presentation. There's a beauty. Have you guys ever listened to a book that has been recorded? Not, like we all read books, right? But listening to a book that's been recorded. Have you guys listened to this? So anybody else in class? Have you guys ever listened to a book that's been recorded? Like a book on CD or book at MP3, Audible, something like that? Anybody? Are you guys with me? Are you awake? You hear me? Because you're not answering. You're not even looking at me. They're checked out. Are you guys hear my question? Have you ever listened to a book on audio? The answer would be yes or no. No? Guys, Yes or no? 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 He goes no. And he's like his head like this. I just want to know an answer. It's a really simple answer. Stay with me. The beauty of a book on CD or a book that's on audio, that if it is an author reading, it's even better. Like sometimes they have a professional voice artist reading, and they have a beautiful voice and all that, so that's great. But when it's an author reading, you can hear their emotion because this is their work. They wrote it. You can hear how they wanted to stress it when they wrote it. Because maybe a reader, an artist, a voice artist cannot interpret it correctly. So they simply do not know the feeling that the author had when they were writing that particular chapter. So this is where emphasis makes all the difference in orality and speeches and things like that. So that's, you hopefully understand what makes speeches so unique. It's this ability of stressing the emotion. That's why we connect with our audiences, because they're not just reading our words, they're actually hearing our feelings, our emotions.